When researching, I decided to find out what the different codes and conventions for both a horror film and a short film were. From what I had found, I decided to work a plot line around the certain codes and conventions I had found, leaving out the ones I felt were unnecessary. Regarding the codes and conventions of a horror film, I decided to follow the popular use of pulling on people's emotional and psychological fears. In my short film, the protagonist is a troubled young woman who feels as though she is being followed on her way home. From my research, I found that this was a common fear amongst my fellow female peers. My decision to base my short film around a common fear ensured that my film would create an emotional response from my viewers. An existing media text, The Shining, played on people's fears of isolation and how these fears of solitude can make a person become unstable. I believe that my short film conforms to this idea of exploiting the audience's inner and social fears. Also, I established the main character clearly at the beginning of the short film. I believe that the use of close-up shots of the character, teamed with the use of point-of-view shots from her perspective, make it clear to the audience who the protagonist is. I also used close-up shots of the protagonist to show her emotions change from being reflective to anxious. I took this idea from my research. The film The Village also uses a lot of over-the-shoulder shots to create a sense of being followed, whilst the film's use of close-up shots helped to draw out the emotions of the characters. The use of suspenseful music was also used in my piece to build up tension towards the end of the short film. The music by John Murphy quickens in tempo and increases in volume. These factors are common in music for horror films as they keep the audience on edge and prepares the audience for the climax. This music was also used in the horror film 28 Weeks Later, which shows how my music conforms to the conventions of real media products. Low-key lighting was another aspect of the codes and conventions of a horror film that I decided to keep. I also decided to add blue tints to the shots to make them appear more eerie and cold, and increase the contrast levels to create a sharper and more menacing feel to the shot. The low-key lighting, together with the high contrast, created more dark shadows in the shots, making them appear even more sinister. In my editing, I included a montage of short shots to build up tension towards the end of my film. I also used this editing technique to make the audience feel slightly confused as to what they were looking at. I decided to distort what the audience sees in a way that positions the audience to adopt feelings of confusion and hysteric emotions, that of which the protagonist is feeling. I decided to stick with the common use of a female victim due to the common view of them being the damsels in distress. Having a victim that appears weak and vulnerable tells the audience that she is unable to fight back, and that she is easily scared. Having a male victim would not have been so effective in making the audience feel scared for the victim. Furthermore, I chose to include unexpected consequences in the plot to make my short film more interesting and original. Leaving the audience off guard with this technique creates a more tense atmosphere, leaving the audience feeling puzzled. Shadows, stares, and mirrors are all considered key aspects of horror films, all of which I included in my film. However, the codes and conventions of horror films I decided to challenge were chosen due to my complex plot. The theme of my short film was delusions, and I based my plot around the idea that the protagonist is schizophrenic and turns out to be the villain in the end. This goes against the unusual conventions of a horror film, as the audience tends to sympathize with the victim. But as my victim is also the villain, this creates a complicated feeling towards the protagonist. Also, the villains in the horror films are predominantly males, and I also challenged this in my short film as the villain is a young female. Some of the codes and conventions of a short film are as follows. Crediting is left until the end. They are low budgeted, usually only one protagonist. Small cast list, unique outlook on the world, focus around social issues, plenty of non-diegetic sound, high contrast and colour editing, enigmas and cliffhangers. I think that my piece incorporates most, if not all, of these things. As stated before, I added high contrast and blue tints to almost all my shots to create a more emotional and expressive scene. Also, it is clear from my cast list that there are only 3 people used in my short film, one of these people being one of the voiceovers. The fact that I only have 2 characters makes the short film more intimate and makes the audience focus on the actions of these 2 characters more. By including the social issue of paranoia and murder, I have conformed to the codes and conventions of a short film, as well as that of a horror film. As my film is based around these social issues, it could make the audience feel more wary of their surroundings. I wanted to base my short film around issues that the public fear due to the fact that murders like that featured in my film do occur everywhere in the world. Do occur everywhere in the world.